Today, last class, you learned what parts of the brain are involved in storing your memories. And this class is we're gonna focus on problems with memory. So I would encourage you to open up the PowerPoint on Teams, the link to it on your phone, and then you can use that as a guide to write down notes because I'm not going to, there's a lot of notes and it's good to have that as a reference, and I'm not going to go over all of them because the storage on my computer is low apparently. All right, so problems with memory. Do it. Come on. Come on. Nice. All right, so we have memory construction and memory reconstruction. So when we form new memories, that's called memory construction. Like right now, you are forming a memory for what memory construction is and what memory reconstruction is. The process of bringing up old memories, though, is called memory reconstruction. So just like the last video that you were shown from last class, where Jordan Peterson is talking about how we can reconstruct our memories of traumatic experiences by writing down the story multiple times. I encourage you to try that. If you, like the hardest thing that you've ever experienced, write about it every day for a few days and then see how the story might change. Or at least your perspective of the story is going to change. And that's memory reconstruction. That's actively using this process that we do anytime we think about something in the past. There's a slight change. We don't always think about it the exact same way. So it's not like taking a picture. Your mind is not like taking a picture. It's not like taking a video recording. If I record my dad catching a fish, okay, I can pull up that video and see exactly how big that fish is every single time. But if my dad is telling the story of him catching the fish, every time he tells the story, that fish might get a little bigger and a little bigger and a little bigger. And that's memory reconstruction. We're reconstructing the memory. Your mind is not like a video recorder or a camera. So, as we retrieve our memories, we tend to alter or modify them. That is the reconstructive part. So a memory pulled from long-term storage into short-term memory is flexible. New events can be added and we can change what we think we remember about past events, sometimes resulting in inaccuracies and distortions. People may not intend to distort the facts, but it can happen in the process of retrieving old memories and combining them with new memories. So our very last slide on this PowerPoint is going to go over that. And then we're going to also categorize the different ways that we might forget things or remember things in an incorrect way. So one example of this is suggestibility. When someone witnesses a crime, that person's memory of the details of the crime is very important, right? To police, to the jury, right? We want to see the eyewitness accounts. But because memory is fragile, witnesses can be easily and often accidentally misled due to this problem of suggestibility. And what suggestibility is the effects of misinformation from external sources that leads to the creation of false memories. Sorry if you can hear my dog, he's chewing on a bone right now. Misinformation from external sources outside of themselves, that leads to the creation of false memories. And here's an example. So I'm going to read this to you. In the fall of 2002, a sniper in the DC area shot people at a gas station, leaving Home Depot and walking down the street. Sorry, I'm going to time the lesson. Stopwatch? No, timer. Well, stopwatch. Oh my god. Here we go. Sorry. Okay. These attacks went on in a variety of places for over 3 weeks and resulted in the deaths of 10 people. During this time, as you can imagine, people were terrified to leave their homes, go shopping, or even walk through their neighborhoods. Police officers and the FBI worked to solve the crimes, and a tip hotline was set up. They received over 140,000 tips. That's insane. Which resulted in approximately 35,000 suspects. How do you even begin to go through that? So most of the tips were dead ends until a white van was spotted at the site of one of the shootings. The police chief went on national television with a picture of the white van. After the news conference, several other eyewitnesses called to say that they too had seen a white van fleeing from the scene of the shooting. At the time, there were more than 70,000 white vans in the area. Police officers, as well as the general public, focused almost exclusively, so they put all their effort into these white vans. Also, beware of white vans, though. Because they believed these eyewitnesses, and other tips were ignored because of this, right? So they focused on the white vans and they ignored everything else. When the suspects were finally caught, they were driving a blue sedan. So this is an example of suggestibility because when we suggest this white van, right, then all of a sudden all of these eyewitnesses are like, yes, I also saw a white van. And they might have seen it, but they might not have. And this memory just is a creation. They create a false memory based on this. So suggestibility is also involved when police are interrogating suspects or of a crime. They might use leading questions. So leading questions are questions that instead of asking something like, can you describe what the victim was wearing or what the gunman was wearing, the leading question would have a detail that the person being interrogated or questioned wouldn't have known before, but it's kind of guiding them along. So it's like, instead of asking, can you describe what they were wearing, the policeman, policewoman, police person might say, do you remember the blue shirt he was wearing? That's a leading question. You're giving some detail. You're suggesting some detail that allows them to kind of go along with it instead of create their own description. And eyewitness misidentification. So based on leading questions and also just based on misidentification, false memory, it can lead to false, wrongful convictions. So even though memory and the process of reconstruction can be fragile, police officers, prosecutors, and the courts rely on eyewitness identification. We still rely on eyewitness identification because it is very important, and eyewitness testimony in the prosecution of criminals. However, faulty eyewitness identification and testimony can lead to wrongful convictions, and it's actually the leading cause of wrongful convictions when we look at DNA exoneration cases. So when we finally started to create or develop better technology for DNA exoneration or DNA identification, we then went back and looked at old court cases of people in jail and tried to match the DNA, and then we were able to exonerate people who have been wrongfully convicted. And the number one in all of these cases, the number one cause of this wrongful conviction is putting so much stock in eyewitness identification. Okay, so about 75% of eyewitness identification led to 75% of wrongful convictions, eyewitness misidentification, and then it goes down from there. Forensic science, false confession, an informant, but eyewitness misidentification, we've really put a lot of stock into that. And, it's kind of like, it's similar to the lie detector test. too, because it's based on your heart rate. And, you know, when you're in a dark room and there's an authority figure interrogating you, you might just be, you know, and you're being questioned about a very serious crime that might determine the course of your life for the next 10 years. Your heart can race for a variety of reasons, right? But we put a lot of stock into these things. Anyways. All right. The misinformation effect. So this is another one. Cognitive psychologist Elizabeth Loftus, or Loftus, I don't know, has conducted extensive research on memory, and she studied false memories as well as recovered memories of childhood sexual abuse. Loftus also developed this idea of this misinformation effect paradigm, which holds that after exposure to additional and possible inaccurate information, a person may misremember the original event. So I'm remembering an event, but then there's new information that comes out, or I just go about my day and I have new experiences, and now my original event is somehow misremembered. So here's an example of this. And this is also, so misinformation is also tied to these leading questions as well. So participants of a study were shown films of car accidents and were asked to play the role of an eyewitness. They were asked how fast were the cars going when they smashed into each other. Or some people were asked when they collided into each other. Other people were asked when they bumped into each other, when they hit each other, when they contacted each other. So this is just like the other video you watched from the previous class, the Brain Games one. They redid this study. And the participants estimated the speed of the cars based on the verb used. So different people were asked these different questions, and the difference was which verb was used here in the question. So as you could guess, right, from the video that you watched before, participants who heard the word smashed thought that the cars would state and guess that the cars were driving at a faster speed than those who were asked how fast the cars were going when they contacted each other, right? So smashed led to people thinking that the cars were going a lot faster than when the word contacted was used. So this implied information about speed based on the verb they heard had an effect on the participants' memory of the accident. Then, so here's where it gets, so that part is suggestibility, and this is the misinformation. In a follow-up 1 week later, participants were asked if they saw any broken glass. And there was no broken glass in the picture or the video that they were shown. And participants who had been in the smashed group were more than twice as likely to indicate that they did remember seeing glass. So suggestibility and misinformation is a real effect, has a real effect. So here's a picture of what they might have been shown. Perceived speed based on questioner's verb choice. So smashed, they said 40 miles an hour, and contacted was maybe like 32, 33 here on the average. So the verb definitely influenced what the eyewitness saw and observed. So this is an example of how they've preserved eyewitness memory, and it worked out really well for them. So there was a girl named Elizabeth Smart. She was 14 years old and asleep in her bed at home when she was abducted at knife point. Her 9-year-old sister, Mary Catherine, was sleeping in the same bed and watched terrified as her beloved older sister was abducted. Mary Catherine was the sole eyewitness to this crime and very fearful. In the following weeks, the Salt Lake City police and the FBI proceeded with caution with Mary, and they didn't want to falsely implant false memories or mislead her in any way. So they knew that this was really important, and they didn't show her any police lineups. A police lineup is like showing her multiple different people and saying, who is the perpetrator, or do you recognize anyone? They didn't want to push her to do a sketch of the abductor. She was very young. They knew that if they corrupted her memory, Elizabeth might never be found. So they waited. They just patiently waited until Mary Catherine had any memories that she would offer up. So for several months, there was little or no progress on the case. And then 4 months after the kidnapping, Mary Catherine recalled that she had heard the abductor's voice prior to that night. So 4 months later, it came back to her. He had worked exactly one day as a handyman at the family's home, and then she was able to name the person whose voice it was. The family contacted the press, and others recognized him. After a total of 9 months, the suspect was caught, and Elizabeth Smart was returned to her family. So how did they preserve her memory? They didn't do anything. They waited for Mary Catherine's memory to kind of surface itself. All right, so now let's look at types of forgetting. We have encoding failure and then memory errors. Encoding failure. So encoding is the process of remembering. Like you meet someone and you learn their name, and encoding is a process of remembering their name. Okay, sometimes memory loss happens before the actual memory process, which is encoding, begins. We can't remember something if we never stored it in our memory in the first place. So in order to remember something, we have to give it conscious attention. We have to actively work to process the information. It's effortful encoding. And lots of times we don't do this, right? How many times have you met someone and you're like, hi, my name is this, and then, they tell you their name, and then 2 seconds later you're thinking in your mind, you're like, oh my God, I don't remember her name. What is her name? Because you didn't actively try to use effortful encoding. So you have to do something. So if they tell you their name, you have to say it in your head again, or say it back to them. Something that works for you. For me, I will say it back to them, and then for the next 10 seconds, I'll keep saying it in my mind, or I will, in the next 10 seconds, I think about it in my mind. What was her name again? Okay. And I say it. Another thing that works for me is, well, I can't tell you because it would be, well, for me, if I look at their outfit and their body structure and I say their name, then I'll remember them and I'll be able to tell them in a crowd, right? It's their whole being. But I don't know if I recommend you to look someone up and down, because they might think that, that might be inappropriate. Okay, so let's go here. For instance, think of how many times in your life you've seen a nickel. Can you accurately call what the front of a U.S. nickel looks like? When researchers Raymond Nickerson and Marilyn Adams asked this question, they found that most Americans don't know which one it is. Actually, they did this with pennies, but I changed it to nickels because I have these pictures. The reason is most likely encoding failure. So you'll look at a nickel, right? You'll encode as much detail as you need to know that it's a nickel to be able to distinguish it from a penny or a dime or a quarter, but you're not actively encoding the very details, the minute details of the nickel. So out of these, you can pause the video if you want, but which nickel do you think is the correct one? A, B, C, or D? I'm going to tell you 5 seconds. All right, if you chose A, you're wrong. It's C. So if you got C, this is the correct nickel. Okay, next one. All right, so now let's look at memory errors. So that was encoding errors, like being able to bring something to memory, to long-term storage. And then there's also memory errors. And this is when our memories fail us. And Schachter, who also is an important psychologist on emotion, he calls the memory errors the 7 sins of memory, which is cute. And there's 3 groups: forgetting, distortion, and intrusion. There's 3 forgetting errors, 3 distortion errors, and 1 intrusion error. So Schachter's 7 sins of memory. This is a chart. You can refer to this in your phone or laptop as you're pulling up the stuff, but I'm going to go over 3 of them. So, I'm sorry, all 7. So the forgetting errors are transience, absent-mindedness, and blocking. Distortion errors are misattribution, suggestibility, and bias. And then intrusion error is persistence. And you'll see the type here, a description, and an example. And we're going to go over each one. So, Brutus, do you mind? Hey, Bubba. Transience is our first forgetting error. So transience is just the act of memories fading over time. So in 1888, German psychologist Hermann Ebbinghaus analyzed the process of memorization. And he tested himself. He was memorizing a list of nonsense syllables, and he measured how much he could retain when he attempted to restate the list. So he tested himself over multiple periods of time. First, he did it. So he tried to memorize the syllables and then tried to write them down. And then tried to write them down 20 minutes later. And then tried to write them down 6 hours later. And then a day later and 5 days and whatever. All the way up to 30 days. And he came up with this forgetting curve. I don't know how much this has been tested on other people, but he created a curve. It's in the book, so we're going to use it and study it. So due to storage decay, this is just what it's called, of you forgetting things over time. We call it storage decay too. An average person will lose 50% of the memorized information after 20 minutes. And 70% of the information after 24 hours. What? That's crazy. Thank God for Google. Your memory for new information decays quickly and eventually levels out. So let's look at our chart. Here we go. So he memorized it, I don't know, syllables. I guess he was able to recall it at 100%. And then after 20 minutes, it was like 55. After an hour, it was at 40%. 9 hours, 35%. A whole day, we're down to only remembering 30%. That means 70% was lost. And then 2 days, we're at 25% remembering. 6 days, almost 20. And then 31 days, 10%. So it's like we only remember 10% of our experiences or our intentional, like, things that we try to encode. All right, so let's test this. All right, I'm going to pause the video for 2 minutes. 2 minutes. Try to memorize these words. 2 minutes. Okay, this is just a blank slide. Write down as many as you can remember. All right, so now write down as many as you can remember. Boom, just do it. You got 30 seconds. Give yourself 30 seconds. Write down as many as you can remember. All right, if you've paused the video, probably pause the video. Hey. So then flip your page. Don't look at it again, okay? Flip it over. New slide. Let's go to the next things. And then we're going to test you again in 20 minutes and see if you remember the same amount of words. Or if we're proving Ebbinghaus correct and you only remember half of them. All right, so the second type of forgetting is absent-mindedness. And this is a result of lapses in memory caused by breaks in attention or our focus being somewhere else. What do you think is the biggest culprit of breaks in attention? I swear, if you still have your notifications for social media on your phone, don't tell me. I'll cry right now. So Cynthia, a psychologist, recalls a time when she recently committed the memory error of absent-mindedness. She says, this should be a quote, but it is more than 4 lines, so it should be indented if you guys know literature. All right. When I was completing court-ordered psychological evaluations, each time I went to court, I was issued a temporary identification card with a magnetic strip, which would open otherwise locked doors. She could unlock the locked. As you can imagine, in a courtroom, this identification is valuable, and no one wanted it to get lost or be picked up by a criminal. At the end of the day, I would hand in my temporary identification. One day, when I was almost done with an evaluation, my daughter's daycare called and said she was sick and needed to be picked up. It was flu season. I didn't know how sick she was, and I was concerned. Okay, so her break in attention. I finished up the evaluation in the next 10 minutes, packed up my briefcase, and rushed to drive to my daughter's daycare. After I picked up my daughter, I could not remember if I had handed back my identification or if I had left it sitting out on the table. I immediately called the court to check. It turned out that she had handed her identification back, but she couldn't remember it because her attention had been broken and her focus was somewhere else. This is what absent-mindedness is, okay? Easy peasy. Now, what are all the things that you might, like if you are trying to remember something, if you're trying to study something, you have to give yourself a safe space to focus. We should call it a focus space. And a focus space is away from the distractions, okay? You're not putting, you're not playing Netflix on your phone while you're doing your work on your computer. You're not leaving your notifications on and checking your phone every 5 minutes. You need to, in order to focus, in order to memorize, you have to limit distractions. This is Memory 101. We're gonna go over this next class. Tips and tricks for remembering things. All right, so third forgetting type is blocking. So this is just not being able to access previously stored information. So this is when things are on the tip of your tongue. Okay, so here's an example of this. Not being able to remember the name of an actor, but you can describe everything about them. The first out of 3 distortions is called misattribution. So this happens when you confuse the source of your information. This is a very sad example. But let's say Alejandra was, sorry, I don't know why I said it like that, because it's fun, was dating Lucia, and they saw the first Hobbit movie together. Then they broke up. And Alejandra saw the second Hobbit movie with someone else. Later that year, Alejandra and Lucia got back together. The lore continues. One day, they are discussing how the Hobbit books and movies are different, and Alejandra says to Lucia, I loved watching the second movie with you and seeing you jump out of your seat during the super scary part. When Lucia responded with a puzzled and then angry look, Alejandra realized she'd committed the error of misattribution. How often have you done this? Be very careful if you have dated multiple people. All right. That's misattribution. You confuse the source of your information. Okay. Second type of distortion is suggestibility. We've already gone over this, okay? Suggestibility is misinformation from external sources. It is similar to misattribution, the one we just went over, that it involves false memories, but the difference is in its source. So with misattribution, you create your false memory entirely on your own. You just mix up two different things. But with suggestibility, it comes from someone else, such as a therapist or a police interviewer asking leading questions of a witness during an interview. Suggestibility comes from someone else suggesting something to you. Misattribution is I misattributed the thing. All right, the third type of distortion is bias. Okay, so your feelings and view of the world can actually distort your memory of past events. Let me say that again. Your feelings and views of the world, your bias, okay, your feelings and view of the world can distort your memory of past events. Here are 3 types of bias that can distort your memories. Stereotypical bias. This involves racial and gender biases or anything. Honestly, any kind of stereotyping that you do. When Asian American and European American research participants, so there was a study, when they were presented with a list of names, they more frequently incorrectly remembered typical African American or Black names, such as Jamal or Tyrone, to be associated with the job basketball player. Okay, let me break this down. There was a study, and they had to memorize the names of certain people in certain jobs, okay? This person does this job. This name does this job. This name does this job. And they memorized it, okay? They had stereotypical Black names, stereotypical white Caucasian names, so they just had those 2. So they were just testing white versus Black, okay? So the names and the occupations were all mixed up, okay? But they incorrectly remembered the African American or stereotypical Black names like Jamal and Tyrone to be associated with the job of basketball player. And then they more frequently incorrectly remembered the typical white or Caucasian names, such as Greg or Howard. There was probably a Chad there, to be associated with the occupation or the job of politician. That's crazy. Okay. Now, this happens in all kinds of different ways. Okay. It's not just race and gender. We have stereotypes. We have stereotypical bias towards different ethnicities, different countries. Even within job types, we have, there's so many kinds of stereotypes, you guys. We also have egocentric bias involving, which is enhancing our memories of the past in our favor. Okay, did you really score the winning goal in that big soccer match, or did you just assist? Or, how big was the fish? Because I remember it being this big, but you're saying it was this big, okay? Egocentric bias. Enhancing our memories of the past in our favor. And then hindsight bias happens when we think an outcome was inevitable after the fact. This is the typical, oh, I knew it all along. I knew it was going to be that way. So the reconstructive nature of memory, how we can reconstruct our memories, contributes to hindsight bias. We remember untrue events that seem to confirm that we knew the outcome all along. Yes? Yes? Hi, Bubba. Boop. Okay. All right. And then the last memory error is, see, what memory error am I committing right now? Absent-mindedness, maybe, because I was just interrupted rudely. Okay, is intrusion, and there's only one. It's called persistence. Have you ever had a song play over and over in your head? How about a memory of a traumatic event? Something you really don't want to think about? When you keep remembering something to the point where you can't get it out of your head and it interferes with your ability to concentrate on other things. This could also be a crush. How many times have you're daydreaming about someone and you can't stop thinking about them? Oh my God, they looked at you from across the cafeteria. This is called persistence. That memory is being so persistent in your mind that your mind will not let it go. Sir. And why do you think I include a picture of a veteran here is because they typically carry a lot of PTSD, which is post-traumatic stress disorder. They carry a lot of trauma. And because of that, they have memories that are really difficult for them to move past or not think about when they re-enter society after they serve. Brutus. All right. Last types. Sorry, guys. It's a lot of writing, a lot of vocab today. Proactive versus retroactive interference. Okay? Proactive interference is old information hinders recall of new information. Like how they ask us to change our password and it has to be 15 characters long and it has a lowercase and an uppercase and a number and a special character. Every 6 months they ask us to do this. How am I going to remember all of my new stuff? All of my old passwords are still in my mind and I can't do it. Okay. So, that is proactive interference. The old information hinders the new information. So here, learn a combination to a high school locker, right? So your old high school locker combination is 170432. And then you get a new locker combination, but you can't remember it because you're only remembering the old one. I remember my first passwords, but I can't remember all of the continually changing new passwords. It's so annoying. Okay. Then the other type is retroactive interference. And the interference, right, it's interfering with our memory. So, oh my God, my hair keeps itching my face. Okay. So you are learning your sibling's new college email address. Okay, but the knowledge of your new email address interferes with the recall of the old email address. So this is where, okay, I changed my password so many millions of times. With every new email I get, I have to create a longer password because they keep increasing the ridiculousness of how long these passwords have to be. So now I have to, I update my phone and now I have to log into my old email again. But I only remember my last password because I know my last password now, my latest password, but my old email address that I now have to sign into, I don't remember the first password. I don't remember the fifth random password amidst the 20,000 passwords that I've had to remember. Stop it. That's retroactive interference. The new interfering with the old, the retro. Okay? Get it? All right, so now we're going to look at the Mandela effect. But don't everyone scan this all at once, okay? Mandela effect is, oh my God, hairs everywhere. Stop it. Stop it. The Mandela effect, sorry. What I want you to do is pick a partner. You could do 2 or 3 people. And one person, I want you to scan, oh my God, I want you to scan the QR code. And I want you to test yourselves. But first, let me explain what the Mandela effect is. So the Mandela effect is, this is it's like a cultural phenomenon. This is like a weird psychological phenomenon that happens, continuously happens. And you can see me pet a bird. What happens is a huge group of people forget, a huge group of people misremember certain things, okay? Certain specific things. So where this originated was Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela was someone who was arrested for his protesting or activism in, I believe it was South Africa. I hope I'm getting this right. And a mass group of people thought that he died in jail. A mass group of people thought that he died in jail. And he didn't die in jail. He went on to become president of the leader of South Africa. I think this is correct. I hope it's right. And he did not die in jail, but lots and lots and lots of people thought that happened. And this kind of spurred off this psychological phenomenon that people study now, where we are misremembering things. And, based on what we just went over, what do you think is happening? Like,